Hey, thank you all so much for joining us for this evening's Celebrating Malheur Speaker Series presentation with Jess Wenick. And so those of you that don't know me, I'm Janelle Wicks. I'm the Executive Director for the Friends of Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. This monthly speaker series is in part a celebration of Malheur Refuge in general, but also the Friends of Malheur's 25th anniversary. So we have had incredible presentations the first Thursday of every month, starting in January. And those recordings can be found on our YouTube channel, Malheur Friends on youtube.com. And we're thrilled about the ones upcoming over the next couple months. So please stay tuned and join us for these as we continue celebrating the refuge and the Friends' quarter of a century of stewardship for the refuge. So the way this will work this afternoon is that we'll have a chat where you can pop your questions and I can moderate those at the end of Jess's presentation. If anything really seemingly pressing comes up, we may interrupt and ask if it feels really timely. Otherwise, we will have about 30 so-ish minutes from Jess and then have time to ask our follow-up questions and have some dialogue about some of the things that we've learned. So I do want to remind everyone that we are recording this, so we are going to keep everyone on mute for the duration of the program, just to maintain the integrity of the audio recording. So thank you so much for being here. And without further ado, I'm thrilled to have Jess Wenick with us this afternoon to talk about the comprehensive conservation planning then and now. So our previous experience in developing a comprehensive conservation plan and what the future of that looks like going forward. So without further ado, Jess, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome, and thank you for the opportunity, Janelle. So if you want to advance.
I sure do. There we go.
All right, so just a real quick introduction of myself. I had created originally this slide and had like my career on it. It's like, well, that's just ridiculous. And so I put my career in a nutshell, so you can see. In the photos there, a little bit of interesting tidbit is my adventure at Malheur actually started in 1990 when I was a high school crew member of the YCC program on the refuge, and I came back for a repeat in '91, and that's a picture of us in the upper corner there. That was our YCC crew. But I started at Malheur in 2003, and then 2016, at which time I went over to the regional office to be an inventory and monitoring zone biologist for the region, and also the regional invasive species coordinator. And then in May of 2023, I returned to Malheur as the restoration coordinator for the refuge. Next, please. All right. So what is a comprehensive conservation plan, a CCP? So basically, a CCP is a 15-year plan that provides, well, management guidance for refuges. It's that simple. And we do them because they are required by the National Wildlife Refuge System Administration Act of 1996, and then also our Improvement Act of 1977, which actually mandates that CCPs be developed on all refuges across the nation. So these CCPs cover all management. And so that includes habitats and associated wildlife, visitor services, cultural resources, hunting and fishing and so forth. Next. Okay, so we did our first CCP signed in 2013, and in this process, we partnered with the public in every aspect of the decision-making process of that CCP. And that was unique because it was different from the normal government planning process. So we had public meetings and a core group representing all the possible interests of the refuge. And we were working through chapters of the CCP with this core group and with the public in these meetings as we moved forward. So what really made it unique was when the draft CCP came out, there were no surprises because everybody had already, that was interested and engaged, already knew what was in it, what was discussed, and why. And so in doing so, to date, it still remains the most collaborative CCP that has been done in the entire nation. And so during this process, we did our best to incorporate all the insights and recommendations of everybody to the fullest extent possible, which really helped us to overcome a lot of the conflict and the controversy that seemed to surround a lot of refuge management issues prior to that. So in doing all of this, we really worked from a collaborative foundation, and that really added a lot of value to this process. Next. Okay, so we partnered with the High Desert Partnership in order to, they provided facilitation for this process. And the High Desert Partnership, or HDP, really was created to, well, I guess you could summarize it as saying that they bring people together for a common goal, finding common ground in addressing rural challenges and opportunities in our community. And since the refuge is in the Harney County community, they were very interested in taking part in that. And so the partners that were all brought together went through a 3-year CCP process. There was a lot to cover during that time. And this CCP collaborative then evolved into the Harney Basin Wetlands Collaborative once the CCP was done. And the CCP collaborative was felt to be so successful that it really motivated HDP to go on and develop additional collaborative processes in the county. And so, all of these collaboratives emphasize, relationships, especially of diverse interests, trust building, shared science, and also transparency in adaptive management. And to date, HDP supports 6 collaboratives. And so the other 4, oh boy, I set myself up if I can remember these. The Harney County wildfire, forest restoration, youth in the community, and also a business collaborative for the county as well. Next slide. All right, so conceptualizing and moving forward. So we have been in this current CCP since 2013, and since it's a 15-year plan, 2028 would be when we would be revisiting it and seeing what's working, what's not working, and moving forward from there in a normal situation, right? But we don't find ourselves in a normal situation. And so go ahead and go to the next slide, Janelle. And so we realize that there are some significant issues that need to be addressed much, much sooner than later. And so Travis gave a presentation, I believe it was in January, in the same format to the same group in January, and touched on some of our major issues that we're currently facing on the refuge. So I'm just going to hit them at about 1,000-foot level. And if you want to know more about that, then I'd encourage you to go and find that presentation that our ecologist, Travis Miller, provided. So the original CCP that we did in 2013 did note some challenges and some threats that were associated with some of our management. And some of those really tended to evolve around the way that we irrigate our wetlands. And so in that planning process, we developed strategies to help counteract these threats. But with the way that the ecosystem has changed and these invasives have behaved in a different way than we were originally projecting, these Band-Aids, you could say, proved to be largely ineffective in dealing with invasive plant issues. And it just so happens that the way that we do irrigate is the perfect storm, the perfect scenario for reed canary grass. Okay, next, please. All right, here we have some photos. And so you can see that there has been some change. These are the two same locations over time. I threw the ones up above in because we always need a little bit of good news, right? And so this was a riparian project on the Blitzen River that occurred just really close to P Ranch on that stretch of the river back in 89. You can see they were starting to do some riparian work. And when the biologist that was here, one of the biologists that were here in the mid to late 1980s, set up a transect. And this is photos from his transect in 1989. And David Johnson came back to the refuge in 2011 and resurrected those transects for us and found this difference. You can barely even recognize that riparian area along the Blitzen River, which is great. However, he did find areas like the one represented below. For those of you who are familiar with the refuge, this is Knox number 4 field is in the southern part of the refuge, directly adjacent to the Knox ponds. And so in 1986, they were finding native grasses dominating this meadow. And when he came back in 2011, it had turned into a reed canary grass monoculture. And so part of the problem with the way we irrigate and reed canary grass specifically is we no longer have connectivity between the floodplain and the river because the river is quite entrenched. So when we do flood irrigate, then all of a sudden the water table goes from like 80 inches deep to the surface, and it stays there for 2-3 months, maybe a little bit longer. And then when we stop flood irrigating, then the water table drastically drops almost overnight. And this puts our native plant communities in shock. And unfortunately, reed canary grass is really able to thrive with these radical changes and take advantage of that competitive edge to really continue to expand. Next slide. All right. The second plant of our triad of biggest problem plants currently is hybrid cattail. And a lot of people have not heard of hybrid cattail. It wasn't really on anybody's radar until around 2016, 2017. We mentioned it in our CCP, but we had no idea what it was actually capable of. And back then, we had theorized that it was on the refuge, but we really hadn't documented it. The vast majority of the cattails that were on the refuge were the native common cattail. And then there was a little bit of the introduced European narrowleaf cattail. And hybrid cattail comes about when those two come together. and it creates basically a super cattail. Now, this photo right here was taken in one of our fields, and this is called the lava bed field in the diamond area of the refuge. And you can see in there a tractor, and right behind the tractor is hybrid cattail. Now, when I left in 2016, that was not there. And when I came back in 2023, it was shocking to see how much there was. And our ecologist, Travis, has been doing surveys around the refuge and is finding that in places there are 40% hybrid cattail versus the common cattail. In other areas, 80% hybrid cattail. And when I go out on the boat launch road out toward Malheur Lake, all I'm seeing now is hybrid cattail on the way. And this is problematic because it has a growth pattern that is much, much different than common cattail. And it grows really close together, and it can get very, very tall, and it can handle drier conditions than common cattail and wetter conditions than common cattail. And it grows so thick that wildlife, even ducklings, can't get through it. It just creates a botanical wall that cannot be penetrated once it becomes established. And so it's very alarming to see that amount of spread so quickly across the refuge. All right, next slide. Smooth brome. For those of you who aren't familiar with smooth brome, it's a forage grass. It's really, really high quality livestock feed. However, it's really, really horrible wildlife habitat. We had smooth brome for decades, but it was very contained in a specific area close to the gate going into the East Canal on the south end by the Steens Loop Road. And it stayed there for decades. We started to see a little bit of it popping up along the Central Patrol Road, but not enough to really be overly alarmed yet. Quite frankly, I didn't understand enough about the species. I should have been more alarmed than I was before I left the refuge. When I came back in 2023, it had taken off. And now it is all the way up the Blitzen Valley from the south boundary all the way up almost to headquarters. And it has taken over parts of our best meadows. What you're looking at right here is a picture that Travis took this year. This is the island field. This is directly north of P Ranch. This field right here, we always touted as our best meadow. And when I had done plant surveys in the past in this area, we found 120 species of desirable grasses and forbs in this area. And this whole picture should have been just an amazing photo of wildflowers going through there from all the forbs. And those forbs are critical for species like the bobolink that utilize them for protein for as they're raising their offspring and so forth. And smooth brome can create a dense monoculture because it's rhizomatous, and it can spread vegetatively and by seed. And it likes drier habitats, so more like a dry meadow condition. Reed canary likes the wetter. And what we see in the island field coming off from the CPR is reed canary grass expanding across the meadow. And then closer to the river, where it's a little higher up, we have the smooth brome, and the two are starting to grow together where they will meet and fight it out for who has niche superiority in that middle ground. And unfortunately, that would mean that we go from 120 species and a wonderful diversity down to 2 monocultures. And so we're having to figure out, how do we start to confront this and how do we deal with this? Next slide, please. And so through all of this, it's important to remember, and we don't, as humans, we don't do a very good job of this, right? But there's a swinging pendulum between really managing well for wildlife and really managing well for habitat. Because the habitat that the wildlife depend on also has its own requirements to continue to be that plant community and not to cross a threshold into a new, much less desirable plant community. And so when we are setting up the refuge to maximize production of wildlife, often if we do that too much, it's like driving a car without stopping to change the oil, right? Eventually, your engine is going to seize. And that's what we're seeing on the refuge is the ecological engine of the refuge is seizing because our water management has tried to maximize that wildlife production too long, over too much of an extent every year to the detriment of the habitat which they depend. And so you can't just manage for one or the other. You have to figure out how to manage for both, right? All right, next slide. And so given these challenges that we're facing, these are the habitats that we think are important to focus on right now in our new planning process. And so you can see that they're all like floodplain habitat. And so a lot of the CCP is still great. The visitor services is working well. The uplands, you know, they're pretty much kind of status quo from what they were when we wrote the first CCP, but we really feel like we need to focus in on the floodplain. And we're including Malheur Lake as well, because for one, it's very susceptible to hybrid cattail as well. You may have heard about the wonderful response that the lake had from the coming out of a drought, and the conditions of the water were just right that through wind action, what little water was there was sheet irrigating every day the bottom of that expansive marsh. And we were able to witness a phenomenal response of bulrush, burrweed, and cattail. And then we, through a lot of effort that was put into carp control by staff and by an army of volunteers, they were able to take the carp out of the system. Well, for the most part, you can never totally remove carp, right? But knock down that population enough that when the lake came back in, it was crystal clear water. The submergent vegetation was phenomenal. The invertebrates in the water were outstanding. Just the productivity of that expansive wetland was just breathtaking, right? But in the original CCP, we were in a deeper marsh scenario, and the focus was carp control. And so that is very essential and important, but we want to address the lake more from a wetland ecology perspective as well. And so these are kind of the areas that we would be diving into. All right, next slide, please. So this is a confusing little chart that we created in starting to brainstorm how to move forward with this process. And so it's involving a lot of work groups, a lot of teams and people brainstorming from different areas of interest and expertise. We had a wetland review that focused primarily on the south end of the refuge last August, so August of 2023. We also had a rancher review of folks who have been on the refuge for decades and treating it and getting their input on what they've seen and what some of their ideas might be. We also are building up focusing on the plant communities, the wildlife work group for those wildlife that depend on those communities, and then the aquatic work group as well to bring all of that all together. And so those groups will be interacting with what we're calling the CCP core group. And the core group is basically a coordination committee. So we plan on having public meetings every other month where we start moving forward in the planning process. And then in the meantime, between those meetings, this core group representing a variety of interests from ranchers to conservation organizations will be helping us to figure out how to maneuver forward in a collaborative way as we continue to go. So it's a very organic process, and it will be again facilitated by HDP. And once again, it will be open to the public. It will be virtual as well as in person to be able to accommodate folks who just really can't travel to Burns every 2 months. And how about the next slide, Janelle? Oh, I already covered what the core group is. Okay, how about the next slide? All right, this is just up to show you just how complex our agency planning can be. And so our strategy is, instead of doing mind-numbing presentations on the direction we might need to go in how to address the CCP, is it a CCP revision? Is it a CCP amendment? Are the goals and objectives that are in the original CCP still strong enough that we can simply do a habitat management plan and address strategies and maybe tweak some objectives with what we have learned since 2013. And then what we as a refuge will do is then go to our regional office with, okay, so this is what our collaborative group is wanting to do. Now, how do we make that work for our policy? So which of those 3 options should we pursue? And so we're not burdening the public with our internal planning process. We don't want to stymie creativity. And so we're just going to be thinking, what are the problems? What do we need to do? And how do we move forward? And then we'll catch up with the paperwork on the backside of that. All right, Janelle, next slide. And that brings us to the end.
Okay, wow, thank you so much, Jess, for that. I'm thrilled to take the time now to facilitate any questions that anyone may have. I've got my chat box open, so feel free to type your thoughts or your questions in there. Jess, I have a question, and maybe I tuned out and missed it, but the 2.0 process, the next stage, these every other month public meetings are, you're hoping for them to start in 2025?
Oh, yes, I did not cover that. You did not miss it, Janelle.
Okay.
We are planning to kick it off toward the end of January of 2025. And so we're working with HDP to start publicizing that probably sometime after Thanksgiving.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Therese, who has been a committed attendee of these programs, says, "You're not planning on leaving again, are you?" I hope not. And I have to echo that. I hope not as well. Jess it's been wonderful having him back here and being a part of the leadership team at Malheur. As everyone could tell from this presentation, he's committed to this work, and it's been really exciting to work with him personally as a director of your friends group. So.
Well, you can't accurately predict the future, right? But I have no intention of leaving again anytime soon.
That's great. Great question, Therese. Well, anyone else? I do have a few things to plug, which I can do while anyone is thinking of their questions. So I just want to say, well, first of all, thank you, Jess, so much for sharing sharing the experience of the previous process and talking to us about what the next process is going to look like. I want to mention to everyone here tonight that not only are these programs going to continue, but the next few are going to be really great. So October is Bat Conservation Month, and so we're going to have Alexa Martinez, the wildlife biologist for the refuge, talking about bats and bat surveys and work that's done on the refuge. And in November, we're going to have Diane Tiemann from the Burns Paiute tribe, cultural director of the Burns Paiute tribe, is going to speak to us. I'm really thrilled about that. And then in November, special treat, it's me. So I'm hoping to round out the year talking a bit about sort of a year in recap for the Friends of Malheur and taking a look forward at the future of our organization. Having just celebrated a quarter century of conservation stewardship for Malheur, what does the next quarter century look like for us? Now, amidst all of that, you may have received information in your mailbox or in your inbox about an event coming up October 5th. We are having a birthday party in Bend and really excited to be celebrating our birthday, our 25th anniversary, alongside the 90th birthday of our founding member and renowned Central Oregon, Eastern Oregon conservation activist, Alice Elshoff. So there is still space to RSVP for that event. You just have to find that information on our website, our Facebook page, or you could always email me with any questions anytime. You can find me at friends@malheurfriends.org. So with that, it doesn't seem like we have any more questions. Therese, yes, this was very interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Conrad. I agree. It was a great presentation. It's good to learn about all the planning that is taking place. It's also dismaying to hear how difficult it is to deal with the invasive animals and plants. Yes, yes, these are challenges, but it is encouraging to know that our team is so eager to meet these challenges. So, and with the support of our membership and our constituents, with the Friends organization, we're able to help support that work. In a meaningful way. So thank you. Okay, well, with that, there's no more questions. I want to take an opportunity one last time to thank you, Jess, so much for giving your presentation this evening. And we will see you all again in October with Alexa. All right. Good night, Jess. Good night, everyone.